session. All right, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us on the IEA monthly webinar today. My name is Lisa Jordan and I'm the Managing Director of the IEA. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I'm the Executive Director of the Executives Association of Charlotte as well. These webinars we do once a month. They're free for you to attend and free for you to host. So if you have a great topic that you would like to share with the rest of the members of the IEA, I'll have my contact information in the chat and you're welcome to reach out to me and we will get you set up to do that. Also want to give a quick plug and shout out about our conference in 2024. A lot of people have been asking when and where the IEA Conference 2024 will be. And the answer, drum roll please, if you haven't heard, is we will actually be going to Las Vegas, and the IEA board is going to be hosting the conference this year in September of 2024. So look for more information in your inbox about that soon, but would love to have you join us there. And that's a great segue because our speaker today, Nathan, is dual member in the Las Vegas execs and also Long Beach execs. So hopefully I'll get to meet Nathan in person next September. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce Nathan. Nathan Whittacre has always been passionate about technology and entrepreneurship. I love reading in his bio that he founded his first business at age 11 when he ran a candy store for 2 years out of his home. So love that entrepreneurial spirit. He founded Stimulus Technologies in 1995 with his brother and father with a goal to provide advanced technology solutions for his clients. His passion for innovation, analyzing hard issues, creating solutions, and fixing problems has created a portfolio with a wide variety of information technology skills. He earned a bachelor's and master's in computer science from University of Nevada at Las Vegas. And as a lifetime student, he enjoys reading a diversity of books on entrepreneurship, company culture, psychology, religion, technology, and science fiction. When Nathan is not building his company and helping his clients, he enjoys spending time with his 5 children, camping, running marathons, racing in triathlons, volunteering at church and scouting, and, fun fact, flying his airplane. So really cool story there, Nathan. Looking forward to getting to know you better through this webinar. And with that, the floor is yours.
Well, thanks, Lisa, and it's great to be here. Appreciate the introduction, and just a quick shout out. I told Steve yesterday, who's the executive director of the Long Beach organization, or Long Beach Executive Association. I'm officially the member there, and then I have a general manager in the Las Vegas Executive Association. But it's great to be part of both of them. When we moved into a new location, kind of expanding our business, that's the first thing that I sought out, is where there is an executive association, and joined it right away since our category was open. So let me share my screen here. So hopefully everybody can see that, the presentation. And I'll give some breaks as we go along here to answer any questions that come up. I'll kind of be monitoring the chat, and I know Lisa, you'll I think monitoring it too, and shout out if there's any questions that come up. So cybersecurity, it's a big topic, and it's one that business owners, I think, should be aware of extensively, because it's definitely, just like a lot of areas of our business, we have to know something about, and we have to deal with, even if we don't want to deal with it. So today, the goal of this presentation, I know all of us are very busy, and you joined whether it's the morning or afternoon or lunchtime here in Las Vegas, you want to get something out of it. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about 3 different case studies that have come up recently, and how they affect small businesses, different areas that we have to protect against as small businesses. So that's the goal today, is really for you guys to take something away. This will be a little bit of a working webinar too, so grab a piece of paper. Towards about halfway through, I'm going to have you do an interactive workshop here as part of it. So So things we're going to cover today is how companies are still getting into company networks and costing us billions of dollars. We put all this infrastructure in place to protect our companies, and a lot of it, unfortunately, is not working. A lot of the stuff that we did 5, 10 years ago that was good enough then is not working anymore. And it's gotten worse because we've moved a lot of our employees and a lot of our information out to the cloud and away from our office. So we're not just protecting our office environment anymore. We're protecting, workers that are working anywhere they might be. I'm currently sitting in my house. I work from home. A lot of my employees do the same. I'm sure a lot of your employees do too. And so there's just so much more that we have to worry about today in cybersecurity of protecting these environments. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Talk about also, some actionable items you can take inside your business today to help you protect you against these threats that are out there. Because ultimately, my goal today is help you not be the sitting duck, to protect your investment that you made in your business against these cyber threats that are out there. Kind of a little bonus, I'll have some information on how you can get some more detailed information about how your company is, where you're at today, because that's one thing that we get a lot of requests of is, where do we stack up and how do we protect ourselves, what critical areas we have. So we'll put together a network assessment and a personalized plan for your company, and I'll include that. So I'll have a link at the end of the webinar on how to get that from us. So Lisa talked about this. I'm not going to go over it, but I'm passionate about technology and a lot of different things. And I want to help businesses really improve their business through technology. And part of that journey is in the last 2 years, I've written a book. And last week, my book was recently released and published. So on the 10th was my publishing date. So if you're interested in the book, you can scan that QR code there, and I'll actually have a link at the end too. But a lot of these topics I'm talking about today are instilled in this book, along with some tips and tricks on, especially for small businesses, how to use technology to better enhance your company. Because a lot of people look at technology as especially the security part of it, as a cost, and I wanted to focus on ways that businesses can improve their company through technology. And so about half of my book is focused on improving your company through technology, and half of it is how to protect your investment in your technology. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on in businesses today. And the FBI compiles a lot of data from different industries and the insurance companies and things, and compile over what are the losses in business over because of cybersecurity. And it is a multi-billion-dollar problem. So over the last 5 years, and this is the latest data that I have is through 2021. We'll be seeing the 2022 data. I think it's already been released, but I haven't put it in the slides here yet. But it's over $6 billion a year from reported incidents of cybersecurity. I believe those numbers are a lot larger than that, because a lot of these events don't get reported to the federal government. Companies take care of them, don't report them either to their insurance company or to the government. So I think these losses are much bigger than that. Kind of an interesting statistic here too. I am in Nevada and California in my business, and they're in the top 10 of states that are affected by this. California by far is the largest state of the number of victims of cyber attacks. So affecting a lot of people each year, affecting a lot of companies, and it's costing us a lot of money. So, and we're finding these attacks are becoming more and more vicious. And I have to update the slide every time I give this or some type of presentation along this. There's so much new malware or viruses or different things that are coming out each year. In 2018, there was over 137 million new malware or virus instances that came out. 2019, there was 25 million additional new samples. So these are coming out dramatically, and they're just altering themselves just a little bit. The standard antivirus isn't catching these new attacks that are coming out. And then the question is what is it costing businesses? The average cost to a business is over $300,000, and I just want you to think about that. You know, if you walked in tomorrow into your company and there was $300,000 less in your bank account, what that would do to your business. And on top of that, there's a lot of bad things that happen to companies. And part of it is like, you know, if you were broken into, if your brick and mortar store or your shop was broken into by thieves, there would be a lot of sympathy that would be poured out to you from the community or from your customers because of that loss. But with cyber attacks, it's kind of the opposite, that a lot of times when a company's network is hacked into, there is this embarrassment and loss of business because people think that you're not doing enough to protect yourself. And we'll talk about that here in a minute on one of the case studies I'm going to bring up. So this is even a worse problem, I think, than just, you know, your equipment being stolen or your company vehicle being stolen. This is a big cost and also a big loss because of, you know, the embarrassment of the guilt in the marketplace that occurs because of it. Now, I'm sure when you go to the IEA or your local executive association, you don't talk among each other about this too much, but I can assure you that if you surveyed your room in your executive association or your friends that are in business and said, you know, how many of you have been a victim of some type of cyber crime or cyber attack, I would say a good portion of them are going to say that they've either been targeted or have fallen victim at some point. You get a room of probably 10 business people in there, and at least one of them have lost money due to a cyber crime. And a lot of it, you know, we don't talk about this because it's bad PR. You know, you don't really want your clients to know and people to know. There's also legal ramifications, especially in the compliance world. If you're a medical or you're a law firm or in finance or anything like that, there's a lot of compliance that are associated with this too. So a lot of companies want to sweep this under the rug and not bring it up. So, you know, definitely a big issue, a big problem in the marketplace, and it affects large and small businesses just as much. So let's talk about using case studies, talk about some of the growing cybersecurity threats that we see in our company and that are reported publicly. And the first one I want to talk about is social engineering. And this is a term, you probably heard it, and it's you might not know the exact definition because it's a term that I throw around a lot, and it's like, what is social engineering? And it's basically getting somebody to do something they wouldn't necessarily do. So convincing somebody to make an action that they may know is wrong, but they do it anyways. And so let's talk about a social engineering attack that's been big in the news recently. So, and I'm from Vegas, so this is my Vegas story to start out with. You probably heard that two major casino groups in Las Vegas were hit by a cyber attack. The first one was Caesars Entertainment. Kind of interesting that Caesars Entertainment was the first, and they actually paid a very large ransom to get there to prevent the cyber attack from hitting them. A few weeks later, MGM Resorts was also hit, and over 30 of their properties were basically taken offline because they wouldn't pay the ransom. MGM, this is just for some news articles. This was a couple of weeks ago now, but it affected their entire operations. I mean, everything from their casino floors, you saw that picture of, you know, their slot machines that were down. They couldn't get into hotel rooms. There was a significant portion of their company that was taken offline in September. And so, and this wasn't just like a day. This went on for over 10 days before they were able to get operations back up and running. And this piece of software from this company called Okta was involved in both of them. Okta was an authentication system, without getting too in the nitty-gritty of what happened, but it's a system that authenticates users logging into the network. And both MGM and Caesars use the same software. And this is how, and it was a local United States-based hacker group that used this software to get into MGM. But the initial part of it was kind of looking at this is they announced what kind of MGM, and both Caesars and MGM announced what type of software we're using for authentication out in the public. And Okta was very public about, these are our clients, this is who we do business with. And so the hackers were able to get information from public sources about operations inside their company. And using that information, they were able to use a social engineering component to attack Okta. And they knew that they used the software and they could get in. And the way this worked, the social engineering, is they called up the IT help desk of MGM and was able to convince this IT help desk individual that the user, this network administrator, couldn't get into his account. They reset the password and also the multi-factor authentication system and allowed the attackers to impersonate this network administrator who had super user privileges, was able to do a lot on the network. And that's how they got in. They convinced somebody to do something that they shouldn't have done, which was, reset a password. And again, they were able to know that that's how they could get in, was because MGM and Okta were very public about how they managed their network. They did the social engineering attack against the IT provider and IT help desk, and then were able to get in. As a bonus, I threw this slide in here, kind of funny. We're in Vegas, but consolidation for those that were trying to stay at MGM. One of the Las Vegas places offered free lap dances to customers that were affected by the cyber attack. So this was on Fox Business, kind of funny. For customers, got a bonus by another purveyor here in Las Vegas. But some takeaways from this, just thinking about your business, your small business, things that you shouldn't do. The first one is really limit the disclosure of how you operate your business to the public. We all have LinkedIn accounts, we all have social media accounts, but we really shouldn't be disclosing how we manage our company to the public, because that gives part of social engineering attacks is looking for information that's publicly available. And so this information that was publicly announced allowed the attackers to get in there. The other thing is the attacker got into an account that had administrative privileges, and so we need to make sure that that if you're operating in your company and you have administrative rights on your network, it is a way for hackers to get in, because if they take over your account or any of your employees' accounts that have administrative rights, it certainly is a gateway for the hackers to get in. And we need to verify users. This will be the next topic, but make sure that users' access is appropriate for what they're doing. And then you want to limit their access to sensitive systems. We do an analysis of businesses all the time, and just a quick side story that came up in my mind. I did for a prospect, was looking at their network, and my software found that all the users had access to this executive drive that had a bunch of financial statements and a lot of information that should only been had by the owners. And unfortunately, the way their accounts were configured is everybody on the network had access to this administrative and confidential information. And the owner didn't know that that's the way it was configured. So just making sure that your network is the people that need information to certain things should only have information to that data. So second case study here, and I guess, Lisa, are there any questions that came up so far at all from anybody?
I don't believe so. No, not yet. Okay.
So the second threat is account hijacking, and I'll use an example here that's again publicly available. And this feels like old news now, but if you guys remember a few years ago, the Colonial Pipeline was attacked, the company that provides gasoline and pumping to most of the East Coast. And this was offline for a significant amount of time. There was fuel shortages in a number of areas of the country. And it was a cyber attack that took down, national infrastructure. I'm sure some of you might have been affected by it, especially if you're on the East Coast. I see a couple of nods there. So the question is how did attackers get in to this network? And so this was 2021. They got in through a virtual private network account. And VPNs allow companies, and I mentioned this at the beginning, it allows remote users to get into corporate network. And this account that was actually ended up being a vendor's account was no longer in use. It was an account that the vendor was no longer doing business with Colonial, but the account was still active on the network. And that account was available on the network because that username and password was part of a breach on the dark web, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But there was a bunch of passwords that were leaked out on the dark web, and the attackers were able to garner that information or buy that information and then access the network. And so some takeaways just briefly on that is that there wasn't any two-factor authentication on accessing that network. So all they needed was a username and password. They didn't have to enter any other like one-time code to get into the system. The other thing that was an issue, obviously, is there was a user account that was no longer in use anymore, and that's something that we need to do as companies is audit those accounts, audit all our accounts on our network, and remove any employees or vendors that are no longer there. I'm sure you've had employees that have left over the last couple of years that might have access to the network, might have access to data, and making sure that not just employees but also vendors access are removed immediately once they're terminated. And then do periodic audits, because sometimes we had an employee that left suddenly last week. I mean, just gave no notice, just quit one day at the beginning of the day. And a lot of times those things that aren't handled in the normal manner fall through the cracks. So that's a big takeaway from that story. And the final one is this bank fraud, both wire and ACH fraud. And we see this very common, especially in the small business side of things. So story about this, and this was one of, again, a prospect story. So we were brought in to consult for a law firm. And this law firm dealt with financial transactions. And they would help clients through the court cases get money from other parties. And so there was a client that called them up and said, I know my case was won. When am I going to see my money? And they said, oh, we wired that to your account weeks ago. When you send us a bank account information, we already sent that money to you. And he said, no, I've never received anything. So they brought us in to figure out what was going on, because they couldn't figure out why this money was where it was transferred. They had like emails from this person saying please transfer this money to that account. It was verified. And what had happened is one of the employees at this law firm that was dealing with this case clicked on a bad link and put in their username and password to their email account, their Office 365 email account, to a hacker's website. So the hacker got the information of how to log into this email. And then the hackers in these cases, and this is what happened with this, sit there and look at all the email and all the email correspondence that have occurred, and they realize, they find out how they're doing business. How are they communicating with their clients? What type of business that they're in, and they just look at it. And it might be a month, it might be 6 months. They just kind of monitor what's going on. And these hackers realized that they would win a case, they would have some communication back and forth with the client, and then they would make these six-figure money transfers. And so they were just waiting for the next case to be won, and they were able to send an email impersonating the client with the bank account information, and then the client, or the company, the law firm, transferred that money to the hacker. And nobody knew about it for weeks after it occurred. And so it was way past the deadline to be able to go to their bank and cancel the ACH transfer, the wire transfer. And so we see this a lot in the industry. And I think it affects small businesses a lot, because we're a lot more lax at times on processes, especially internal processes. And so some takeaways from this is this company didn't have two-factor authentication set up on their network. And so the hacker just needed a username and password to get into the email. There was no monitoring if those logins were occurring outside of the location or from remote areas. And then finally, there was no what I call two-factor banking or a human process. So there was no verbal communication that was occurring with the client to verify that that account was actually valid. And so, think about in your businesses, any process that, really is a critical process to your company, especially money being transferred. Do you have a separate method other than an electronic method to verify that what you're doing is correct? And this company didn't have that, and that's why they fell victim to it, is the employee just took action based off of electronic communication, which was erroneous. And so a lot of this, again, is developing distrust for electronic communication. And I want you to, that's one of the big walkaways, takeaways from this organization, is you shouldn't trust everything that you receive electronically. Just, I don't want to make you paranoid, but have a little bit more paranoia as you're communicating with people electronically, because there's just so much bad information, bad things that happen on electronic communication or just in the internet in general. I mentioned briefly in the Colonial Pipeline attack about the dark web. And you've probably heard about it. It's been, it's now part of pop culture. You've probably seen it or heard it in TV shows or movies. This separate web, World Wide Web, that is kind of separate from what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And really, what the World Wide Web, or the dark web, is, it allows cyber criminals to communicate and work that in a method that is not detectable by other humans or law enforcement. And a lot of it is drug dealing or sex trafficking, but a good portion of it too is these cyber criminals are trading information, trading usernames and passwords, trading bank accounts, trading credit card numbers. And it's as these hackers gain information or gain access to networks or gain access to computers, they sell the use of that information to others. And that's all happening through the dark web. So the question is how does this occur? And the first part of it is it's allowed because there's a lot of money in this. I mean, I mentioned in the beginning, $312,000 in one successful ransomware hit. An average amateur, somebody that doesn't know much, could make $80,000 per month stealing and selling data on the dark web. And so it's a big business, and it's, multi-billion dollar business. There's estimates in the next few years this will be a $10 trillion business annually of, these hackers buying and stealing things. And, the question is what's enabling them? There's a lot of things that is enabling this. I think one of it is, the pervasiveness of these availability of easy kits that you can buy. The startup cost for this business is pretty low. You can come here to Vegas. There's a Black Hat conference that's you can buy tools to do this, believe it or not. There's a lot of software out there, and especially with the advent of with AI, there's a lot of technology that makes this seamless. So you don't even have to sit there and do much. You just let your software do it. And then, there's the law enforcement is so overwhelmed with these cases that they're just not able to track down these organizations that are targeting small businesses. They're going to help the MGMs of the world, but they just don't have the resources to help, the small law firm or small, CPA firm or professional services firm. So, and then kind of adding insult to injury on this is, the Justice Department put out this notice a couple of years ago saying that if you're paying these fines, these ransoms that these companies are after, that you could be aiding terrorism. And so just straight from their quote is, companies that facilitate ransomware payments to cyber actors on behalf of victims, including financial institutions, cyber insurance firms, and companies involved in digital forensics and incident response, not only encourage future ransomware payments, but it also may risk violating the OFAC regulations, which basically means you could be fined by the federal government for paying a ransom, which is crazy to me. But that's what they're saying. So it's definitely, this is a big issue that are affecting businesses. And the other thing that's enabling this too is cryptocurrency that you've heard about, your Bitcoins and Ethereum and things like that, allows these hackers to trade money anonymously, and it's in a non-traceable format. So it's becoming much harder for the law enforcement to even track down these firms. And so the question is even with that threat of the government coming after you for paying a victim, why would you pay paying ransom? Why would you pay a ransom? And the Colonial Pipeline CEO said it, I think, very appropriately. I know that it's a highly controversial decision to pay the ransom. I didn't make it lightly. I will admit that I wasn't comfortable seeing the money go out the door to people like this, but it was faster for them to get up and running by paying the ransom than by restoring from backup systems. And that's something that I get from a lot of businesses is it's just faster to get back up and running, get things back online than paying the ransom, which is what Caesars Entertainment did. They paid the ransom rather than going offline because they didn't want the cost of losing revenue. MGM took the other way, as they wouldn't pay the ransom and they were out of business for over 10 days. The other thing I get is, we're too small businesses are too small. But over half all cyber attacks are actually aimed at small businesses. And it's because, we are kind of the low-hanging fruit. As small businesses, we often have lack security. We don't have the same safeguards that big businesses do. And, we don't have all the tools in place to protect our environment. We might not have as much to lose, to the hackers, but it's just a lot easier target. So, a lot of people say it's never happened to me. It won't ever happen to me. I'm too small. But complacency is the biggest danger to this. And I just want to think, this is a screen that comes up, if you get ransomed. Hopefully, none of you have ever seen this on your computer before, but it gives you a time, usually a couple days, to pay the ransom. And after that day, they'll erase everything on your network. And the dollar amount on this screen is $300, but nowadays I see ransoms well into the six figures for most businesses if they get hit by it. And if in a couple of days you don't pay that ransom, you're going to lose all your data. So if you saw this on a Monday morning, how would you feel? Think about that. What would your reaction be? I know I would feel, a huge pit in my stomach. I'd feel upset. I'd feel violated. There's just so many negative feelings that occur. So my goal here today in the second half of this presentation is really, how do you protect yourself as a small business? What are some of the things you should be doing today to protect yourself? Before I get into it, Lisa, are there any questions that have come up so far?
No, I don't believe so. This is great information, though. Keep going.
Okay. In my presentation I gave a couple of weeks ago to Long Beach execs, one of the guys, our vice president, got up and afterwards to a very somber room, and he says, it's kind of like the movie back in the 80s that Scared Straight. It is scary to think about all this stuff. So this is a point. I'd like you to pull out a piece of paper, and I have developed this tool called a cyber score. This is a small part of the cyber score in my book, and if you want the full thing, be happy to do it with you. But really understand where your business is today. So I'm going to ask some questions that you guys are going to answer. But before we do that, I want at the top right-hand corner of your paper, hopefully you're grabbing that. If you were to rate your readiness for a cyber attack, where would you rate it? From 0 to 30, 0, hackers would walk in and take everything from my company without much effort. 30, you feel like you're fully protected. You're doing everything right to protect against against hackers. Where would you rate yourself? So top right of your paper, 0 to 30, where do you think you are? And then as we go through, we're going to look at 10 different questions in some different areas of cybersecurity that you need to be responsible for. So these are infrastructure, cybersecurity, compliance, backup and disaster recovery, business strategy, and cloud. And all of these really tie into good use of technology inside your company. So as you go through these, as I'm asking these questions, rate yourself 0, 1, or 2. So 0 is you haven't done anything at all in this area. You don't understand the question as a business owner. And so you just rate yourself as 0. Number 1 is you think you've implemented some of this, but you're not sure if it's exactly what it should be. Number 2 is you're very confident, or write a 2 down if you're very confident that you're fully prepared in this area of business. So 0, 1, or 2 is the responses for each one of these. So the first question here is, I gave a webinar actually last week on this, is maintaining an inventory of all your network. So workstations, servers, laptops, routers, switches, everything that you have inside your company, and you have a sustainable hardware life cycle. So 0, 1, or 2, and don't worry, I'm going to go back and explain what these are later, but I just really want you to, if you understand what I'm saying and you feel like it's fully implemented, give yourself a 2. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this is French, it's a 0. So second question on infrastructure is, you use redundant service providers, internet service providers, and especially if you have a main office that you can flip over between your 2 connections. So you have redundancy on your internet connections to allow you to stay up if there's an outage. Number 3 is your wireless networks are segregated. So you have a primary wireless network inside your office for, or your home for your work. And you have a separate network for your guests to be able to log into, and they have unique usernames and passwords for each one. So you've segregated your guest network from your primary network. So moving on to cybersecurity, the question number 1 is, I'm confident that I have proper cybersecurity software, including a 24/7 security operations center that is protecting my personal and corporate data from attacks such as phishing and ransomware, including all your remote devices. So you have a 24/7 monitoring by a separate security operations center. So this isn't your IT guy, that you use inside your company, or your IT vendor. This is a separate company that's monitoring your infrastructure. So 0, 1, or 2. The next one is question number 2 on cybersecurity, that you train your employees often on how to identify ransomware, phishing, social engineering attacks via email, text messaging, and websites. So you're training your employees on all areas of cybersecurity. Question number 3 is, you've implemented either single sign-on and 2-factor authentication on all your critical line of business applications, such as Office 365, your accounting system, and remote access. But also include banking as part of that too. So if you give yourself a 2, all critical areas of your company, you have to have 2-factor authentication to log into it. Question number 1 on compliance is, you regularly patch your servers and workstations, including all the software on the computers. So you're getting regular updates and you're staying current on all the security patches. 0, 1, or 2. Compliance question number 2 is, you are having regular vulnerability scans on your network, and you are archiving the reporting of those scans for compliance purposes. So and regular, I would say once a year, more often is better, but at least once a year, you're having a vulnerability scan on your network. Question number 3 here is, you are meeting all federal and state requirements for HIPAA, PCI compliance, FINRA, all PII or personally identifiable information rules, and you are confident that you pass an audit. So if the regulators came in, you pass an audit fully in all areas of your business. Backup and disaster recovery question number 1 is, your management team understands the difference between recovery time objective and recovery point objective for your backup and disaster recovery, and you're monitoring and testing your backups regularly. So 0 if you don't know what RTO and RPO is and your IT people have never talked to you about it. 1 if you have an idea what's going on here and maybe not testing it, and then 2 if you're actually testing it and this is part of your regular IT management. Question number 2 on backup and disaster recovery, that you proactively monitor your server and cloud infrastructure for failures of performance, so that business affecting problems can be prevented. So you're regularly monitoring your servers and cloud infrastructure. Then moving on to business strategy, that you're having regular conversations with your technology professionals to make sure that they're aligning with your best business practices. So you're having alignment sessions with your technology professionals. Really, technology should help make your company better. You should be bringing that into the conversation in your management meetings. Number 2 is your IT team is proactively bringing new technology that's out there to your management team to improve productivity and gain a competitive edge over your competitors. Finals area here is cloud. Your cloud-based email and file services are configured with data loss prevention policies, and you have alerting set up to alert you of potential breaches into your cloud infrastructure. So 0, 1, and 2. And then the final question here, I'm sure you're glad this is almost over. Your cloud services are configured to the service provider's recommended best practices. So 0, 1, or 2 on that. So now take and add up your score for all the questions I asked and compare it against the number you put at the top of the paper. So if you gave yourself a 25, you thought at the top, and then as we went through these questions, you ended up with a 12, and there's a disparity between where you think you are and what you're actually doing. If you ended up rating higher, is great. Than what you were, but certainly I think all of us need some improvement in one of these areas or more. So I have a question. Anybody want to share a score that they feel?
Or put your score in the chat if you don't want to say it out loud.
That's too much evidence. Too much evidence.
We do have we got 22 and scored 25. Way to go, Lay.
Great.
Someone asks, how nervous should I be if I know my emails and phone number is on the dark web?
So that's a great question. It's one of those things that once the cat's out of the bag, it's hard to put it back in. I think we should have the default assumption that most of our confidential information is available on the dark web. So there's been enough data breaches out there by major service providers and government agencies that most likely attackers could easily get your name, phone number, addresses, email address, and probably social security number. So most of that information is probably available for purchase on the dark web. So you have to, just assuming that, you have to set up enough protection inside your environment, your personal environment and public environment, that you have to have those protections in place, knowing that information is probably available. So, and it's hard to put that back. I mean, you could change your phone number every few years, I guess, or change your email address often. But once they have things like your social security number or addresses, it's hard to protect yourself against that, other than having monitoring in place of how that's used. So on the personal front, make sure you have credit monitoring to protect yourself against that. So really quick, I guess we have about 15 minutes left. Let's run through some of this stuff. So why did I ask about infrastructure first? And I often say you can't protect what you don't know you have. And so auditing your environment, knowing all your equipment that you have inside your IT infrastructure is the first step to really protecting it. Because what we found often over the years is the hole that attackers get into is that computer that's been sitting in the corner for the last 20 years that nobody knows why or what it does over there. And that's how they get into your network. So once your equipment reaches end of life, it should be swapped out, and you should have a regular hardware life cycle. I actually did a webinar a couple of months ago about IT life cycle. it's not a sexy topic, but it really is a basis for all security. Redundancy, it's not as critical if you don't have a major office, but we find, so much is in the cloud now. If your internet goes offline on one provider, it really takes down businesses. So you really need to have real diversity of your internet service, especially if you have a brick and mortar office or retail store or factory or whatever it may be. And especially if you have servers that are located there. So it's pretty inexpensive insurance to have. And I would recommend fixed wireless as a separate connection if you have fiber or copper coming into your company, because it's the true redundancy of connection, and you should have automatic failover. This is another attack vector that we find people get after is, having both guest and your corporate data on the same network. Really dangerous. And then, if employees have your password, your passcode to get into your wireless network, make sure you're resetting that if any employee leaves. Or you can set up systems that they would log into your wireless with their username and password, and then when that account's disabled, it's automatically disables their access to your network. So this is, again, just keeping your networks sanitary, especially if employees leave. And then, of course, the segregation of guest networks. Guests should never be on your corporate network. And I would recommend that for home, too. If you have kids and you're working from home, have a separate network that the kids log into so that if they do anything bad on their computers, it's not affecting your office computer. One of the comments I get a lot with cybersecurity is, well, my IT people are taking care of that. And I just want to, if there's another big takeaway that you get from this conversation, is that IT, the people that are taking care of your help desk, installing software on your computers, hooking up your printers, they aren't security people. It's not the same person. So you need a separate group to monitor your network 24/7. We, as a company, we actually outsource this to a third party that has 24/7 operations, because a lot of the attackers are getting in the middle of the night. We see a lot of the ransomware occurs like on a Saturday night, Sunday morning. It gets all weekend to infiltrate across the whole network, and then you walk in Monday morning and things are offline. So IT people like sleeping, and so you really need a monitoring system that's 24/7 that is not your IT professionals. And then there's this whole new concept of zero trust that I'm not going to get into here, but it's a way to say only good applications and software can run in your environment. And that's kind of the next level of cybersecurity, is zero trust environments. Employee training is essential. We train our employees how to work, how to run with our company, but are we really training them on good hygiene and use of our networks? And so annual assessments are minimal. I would recommend even more training occurs. And a lot of insurance companies, and from a compliance standpoint, this is now a requirement for most businesses to have ongoing cybersecurity training. I can't, say this enough: multi-factor authentication to all your infrastructure, bank accounts, emails, all that. Make sure you have 2FA enabled, so that the passwords are often leaked out there. You can't trust your users not using the same password on every site. So two-factor authentication is one of the best protections that you can have to protect your accounts. As far as compliance goes, making sure that your machines are up to date, getting patches to both Windows and Mac, and your line of business applications should be patched often, as often as those are released. So there's attacks that happen across the board on these systems that aren't patched, and that's the way attackers get in a lot of times. That vulnerability that took down MGM was actually because of unpatched servers. So they got into the network, and their network was still protected until the hackers found out that their servers were unpatched, and they were able to get access to things. So making sure all your IT infrastructure is patched regularly. And then have a third party come in and do vulnerability scans. This should be at least once a year, again, more often if your compliance requires it. Oftentimes it's monthly or semi-annually, but you should have a third party company come in and assess what your IT professionals are doing. We use a third party inside my organization. We have a third party company that monitors us, and they help monitor our clients too, because it's essential to have somebody else looking over your IT people's shoulders. I can assure you we're all have some type of compliance we have to deal with. Most states have some type of personal identifiable information laws now. A lot of us are in the medical or professional services space. If you take any credit cards, if you deal with any social security numbers, even your employees' social security numbers, all of it is protected by the federal government. And there's a lot of compliance that comes up with it. So, making sure that you talk to your law firm or your attorney about what type of compliance you might be under, and making sure that you're abiding by those, because the fines are huge. I mean, just for example, in the state of California, state level, they fine healthcare organizations $10,000 per patient record that is lost in some type of cyber event. And I mean, think about a small doctor's office that might see, 500 patients. That could be a $500,000 fine. And so, I mean, that's enough to take any business out of business. And so make sure you're staying in compliance. This is one that trips a lot of people up, the backup and disaster recovery. So recovery time objective and recovery point objective is really understanding how long it's going to take your IT professionals to bring your network back up if you have a ransomware or other type of event. And a lot of people think, oh, I have backups in place, and my IT company can get me up and running in a few minutes. And a lot of times, it could take weeks to get back up and running because supply chain issues, getting new servers in place. You really have to, as a management team, have to understand and ask the tough question to your IT people in a realistic scenario. How long am I going to be down? And how much data am I going to lose in a disaster? Worst case scenario, my entire network gets ransomwared or all my IT infrastructure is stolen. How long is it going to take for me to get back up and running fully? And a lot of times the answer to that question is longer than the management team thinks it's going to take. So have that conversation with your IT professionals. And then, obviously monitoring it, your responsible parties should be able to respond to some type of outage before, really the users know about it. The next one on business strategy, there's a lot of technology out there. Are you implementing best practices? You should be talking to your IT team about this, especially if you're using outside parties. At least meet with them quarterly or biannually to talk about things that you could be doing better in your business, implementing best practices and standards. And then your IT people should be bringing stuff to you and say, hey, there's this new AI out there. There's this new software that could really improve the use of technology inside your business to make you more productive and profitable. And so make sure you're having these regular strategy meetings. The last part of it is cloud. A lot of people, another misconception I get a lot is, oh, I signed up for Office 365. Microsoft is backing up my data and protecting me. And the answer is no. By default, Microsoft or Google, they don't back up your data. They don't have any protections in place of your infrastructure. And so it's really important that you have third-party backup systems in place to back up your cloud environment. If you're using Dropbox, OneDrive, ShareDrive, any of these cloud infrastructures, you need a third-party backup of that data too, because that's where most of your company data is living now, is in the cloud. And then the last question here is, the cloud infrastructure out of the box is often not configured to best policies. And so your IT people need to take some time to make sure that they're going down and keeping up to date on best practices to prevent these type of attacks, because it's always changing. There's always new things. I get alerts every week from Microsoft of compliance regulations, things that need to be in place. And there's a lot of stuff that the IT people need to have in place to implement these best practices recommended by the service providers. So if you're interested in the full assessment, this is only a part of it. It's about half of the assessment. Happy to do that with you and provide a complete plan on how to get compliant. So a couple of things to know about this assessment. We don't charge for it. We don't require you to buy it. We do it for businesses because we really want companies to to be protected from this. And it's by application. I mean, if you're just a one-man sole proprietor, I can answer some questions for you, but it's really not. You don't have to implement a lot of this, but there's some stuff you need to do. For the full assessment, you need to have at least 5 employees and some type of infrastructure we can look at. So if you're interested in this, go out to our website, stimulustech.com/cyber. Some additional contact information for you too. I have a lot of, we do podcasts every week, webinars, all of it's transcribed. So if there's a certain area of this that you're interested in, I have a lot of material that's available on my website, nathanwhittacre.com, or my company's website, stimulustech.com. Either site you can go to, there's a lot of information that's available. So any other questions as we're wrapping up the hour here?
Thanks, Nathan. That was fantastic. Yeah, we do have a question. If we have a computer that is turned off and not used, is that safe?
It's safe as long as it's off. The difficulty is if somebody comes over and turns it on, then that could be an issue. The other issue that comes up is if your data is unencrypted on that computer and you have confidential data, and it's stolen or lost, best case is if best scenario is destroy the computer properly, make sure all the data is destroyed on it. So if you have an old like Windows XP machine, Windows 7 machine sitting around that has some data on it, best to take it off the network completely, destroy it, and make sure that it's never going to be a problem for you again.
Hi, Nathan. It's Richard Ma from Hawaii.
Hi,
I have
Richard.
a quick question about, you mentioned Dropbox needing backup. Now, if I keep copies of my Dropbox file locally on multiple computers, does that not constitute a backup?
It does not, because the issue is with Dropbox and a lot of these file sharing software is a ransom on one computer can affect all the computers. And because you have it on one local computer, it's a possibility these attackers can get into the account through the web browser and delete all the revisions also. So worst case scenario, and I've seen this happen, is a ransom on one laptop or one device will encrypt all the data on the Dropbox. They will also delete all the historical versions of it. And because Dropbox will replicate the changes to all the devices, that ransom affects every device that's associated with that Dropbox account. So you want a segregated backup service that's not associated with Dropbox.
So if I was to invest in a mirroring software that I can mirror my hard drive or my Dropbox on my local computer onto a separate drive, will that isolate it?
That's definitely better. I don't like mirroring because, again, changes that occur on one system are mirrored onto the other system. So we often in backup services want disparate systems, so they're completely disconnected from each other. There are tools out there that will automatically back up Dropbox and these other cloud services automatically. They're not that expensive. So for a few dollars a month, and it's definitely an insurance policy to have a piece of software doing that rather than you managing it.
Great,
So,
thank you.
you're welcome. Yeah, just do a couple of quick searches on the internet. We use some cloud-to-cloud tools that are for MSPs, but there's some tools out there that you can get that can back up those cloud environments too, and that are pretty easy to set up and manage. The biggest thing is you want it from different vendors and you want them disparate. So meaning that you can't log into one from the other. So an attacker that attacks your Dropbox account can't use that to get into your backup accounts.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions in the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question you want to ask Nathan directly. We have about 2 minutes left here. This is one of those eye-opening topics that you just feel like you just want to put your head down and say, this is never going to happen to me. I'm not listening, but we all need to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I mean, even small things like making sure that you have 2FA set up on your accounts. I mean, that's an immediate takeaway, whether it's a bank account or Office 365, things like that. That's an easy step you can take that can make you far more secure. And then, talk to your accounting team of, not doing, wire transfers and things without verifying with you other than electronic methods. So, there are some small things that have, big results. Just those two things can save you, thousands of dollars potentially.
Absolutely.
So if you want to connect with me, you can, go out to nathanwhittacre.com. You put in your email address, you can connect with me there. I guess fill out this form and we'd happy to set up an assessment with you and answer any questions. But I'm available, happy to answer any questions offline too, and help consult with you if you're going through this journey.
Wonderful. Thanks for your time today, Nathan. And just a reminder to everyone that we will post this webinar on the IEA YouTube page. There's a direct link on the IEA homepage. If you go to IEAweb.com, you'll see our little YouTube logo in the upper right and click right through there to the YouTube page. And you can share this with your IT team and your friends and coworkers and anyone else who might benefit from hearing Nathan's talk today. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day. And we will see you next month for the IEA webinar. Thanks, Nathan.
You're welcome, and thank you.